Alright, hello. So welcome back. Today what I'll be sharing on is the topic of power. So power contrasts against the things that I've shared in regards of your mirroring and sense of importance, right? Because mirroring and sense of importance work in the principle of influence. And influence work on the principle of I want to make you feel good, and when you feel good, you are much more likely to like me, and because you like me, you are much more likely to do things for me. Power is the other side of the coin. Power is the idea of you are going to do this whether or not you like me or not. And you can say one of the most glaring differences between power and influence is that while influence focuses on positive emotions, you can say that not only does power not concern itself with the eliciting negative emotion, you can even say that to a certain extent, by eliciting negative emotion in you, I would exert more power over you. So the whole idea is that probably in terms of, if let's say we're just talking in terms of power, right? And by the way, I think that I've hinted on this at some point in the past, that in actual fact, although I separate power and influence is actually under the same thing. So you can say that, well, both of them are practically brothers and sisters, right? And if what I want to do is that I want to put it in the most accurate way that I can understand and potentially someone can understand, you can say that power in general, okay, the definition of power to a certain extent is the ability to elicit certain change in somebody's behavior. And be it most likely the change that you elicit is something that you want. So you can say that, well, to make them take certain action, in some sense, falls under the purview of power in general. But then again, when you elicit power, or rather when you utilize power through two different ways. And one of the way is the way that I shared, which is in actual fact influence, or rather in this case is influential power. But most of the time whenever I share topics on influence in general, I will just generally lump it as influence. And the opposite of the traditional view of power that is opposite from influence is traditional power. So, traditional power. So today what I'll be sharing on is on this portion, traditional power. But of course, like the intro that I just touched on, sometimes in order for you to understand power, you have to understand a little bit of what influence actually is. So here's also another fun fact, right? If I were to think in terms of influential and traditional power, I also would associate different traits with them. I associate influential power to be generally more feminine, because the whole idea is that I'm using the soft approach to get you to do things for me, right? And you can say that traditional power is more masculine, because the whole idea is that I'm dominating you. You are doing this whether or not you want to or not. I'm using force to basically force my will upon you. And this is one of the ways that in general I associate the differences between these two, right? And of course the other way is that this focus on positive emotion, and then this focus on negative emotion, and all the other different things. So one of the things that I also link both of them to be is the idea of influential power tends to work more on the principle of thinking, and traditional power works more in the principle of feelings. So you can say that to a certain extent, the feelers tends to understand traditional power more than thinkers. Although if you understand MBTI, you'll say that, like, well, Elong, you're a little bit wrong in that, because extroverted feeling is what you're explaining when it comes to influential power, right? While traditional power is basically extroverted thinking. And of course, if you don't know any MBTI, then don't worry about that. This is not the topic. This is not the video that I'm going to share about this. I'll share about this in the future. although I'm not an expert when it comes down to MBTI, right? But the whole idea is that what I'm talking in terms is not functions individually, but in general. So yes, what you are saying is correct in the sense of traditional power tends to be more extroverted thinking, which is results oriented, and feelings tend to be more moral basis, right? How should human beings by right interact with each other and take into a lot of consideration of how the other person will feel. So you're very correct to say that yes, extroverted feeling and introverted thinking is linked to traditionally to influential power and traditional power in this sense. But what I'm sharing is just the whole idea of feelings in general and thinking in general. Because for influential power, what you tend to need to do is that you need to separate yourself from what you instinctively feel. And you need to focus on although I feel this, I need to take myself out from the equation and actually see things holistically. So one example that I give you is that if going back to the example, if someone asks what is your deepest fear, and then you answer, you can say that, well, acrophobia or all the other things, right? And then they say, oh wow, you're afraid of heights. Why would you be afraid of heights? And then like, I'm not afraid of heights. I climb all the time. And if let's say we are thinking in terms of feelings, right? The person make us feel shitty, right? Because they just belittled us, they made us feel stupid. And belittling somebody is one of the things that you can say that is the fastest way for you to get hated by the other person. Despite that, if you were to take yourself out from the equation, you can understand that this person is actually looking for a sense of importance. And by reframing it and putting it from the perspective of like, wow, it's so impressive, like you're not afraid of heights, then what do you do when you're younger? Then what you tend to do is that, well, you have just exerted a certain amount of influential power because they ended the interaction being liking you more because you give them the sense of importance, and vice versa, right? And not vice versa, just basically in Essentra in general. And the opposite of that is feelings, right? When it comes down to feelings, what tends to do is that it's instinctual. If at that point of time I lash out against the person and I confront the person that like, what do you mean that like so what if you're not afraid of heights, right? I'm pretty sure there's also a lot of things that you are afraid of in general, right? Because of this, and you're useless because of this, and you're useless because, and you try to find ways to hurt this person, and the person backs down from that confrontation. You can say that you have exerted a certain amount of traditional power over them. And because in that situation, they like you less, but you basically get the results that you want, which is them to actually shut their mouth, right? Shut their mouth and be more submissive and actually show you a little bit of respect, right? Not in the respect of like going out of the way, but just basic human decency, right? Don't insult each other. So you can say that in this situation, yeah, these are some differences between traditional power and influential power. But if I were to explain traditional power, and I don't want to keep using the term traditional power, right? So from henceforth, whenever I talk in terms of power, just understand that what I mean is traditional power. And when I say influence, what I mean is influential power. So in power in general, to understand power, you have to understand the animal brain. So this is the reptilian brain that I shared. And beyond the reptilian brain, it's your animal brain. And then beyond that, it's your logical brain. Right? The animal brain works in terms of your emotions. And part of understanding power is to understand emotions. Right? How does your emotion flows in a certain way? You can say that when it comes down to exerting power, what tends to happen is that there tends to be a focus on two particular emotions, which is desire and fear. And you can say that this desire and fear translate to the two key of power in general. If you yourself, you want to wield power, you have to understand that in order for you to exert power over somebody, you have to have one of these two things, ideally both of these. Number one is the power to control their punishment. So you must have control over punishment. right? And in the example that I give you, when someone make fun of your fears of acrophobia and then you confront them and you try to get aggressive, the inherent punishment is that if you don't shut up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch you in your face. And that pain and suffering that you feel, and you can say that to a certain extent, the fear of that would generally affect your decision making skills. Well, affect your decision making in general of whether or not you want to shut your mouth, right? Or you want to try your luck and continue to argue the point, right? You know, oh, you want to threaten me now, I'm going to threaten you back. So, but the most important thing is that, going back to the idea of your power, is that if you want to exert power, you have to have control over punishment. And the second of things that you have to be in control of is reward. And reward works on the principle of desire, right? Which is like the things that you want. So, in general, if you are unable to control one of these two things, then you can say that you have no ability to exert power. And you can say that yes, by default, because all human beings come with practically meat maces, you know, attached to our limbs, we inherently always have the threat of physical harm to the other person, right? So you can say that we can exert power through punishment in general. But going back to the whole other part about power, right? If let's say I were to move on from the next part about power, just beyond punishment and rewards, power works in the principle of I am trying to force my frame upon you. So if I were to touch on one of the things that I shared in the past, which is framing, and I remember I shared a frame when it comes down to attraction. For human beings in general, we see the world and we see certain contexts from a particular point of view. So you can say that maybe what objectively happened is that two of us is making fun of each other. Right? You know, we are calling each other's name. We are telling yo mama jokes about each other, right? But this person thinks that the interaction, we are doing it because we are enemies. We are trying to insult, and we are trying to hurt each other. While I'm seeing it from the perspective of we are doing it because we are friends. Then you can ask that, okay, objectively, what is the real explanation of that interaction, right, where we are telling your mama jokes? You can say that both of these frames are true at the same time. Because, well, one of them thinks that is enemy and one of them thinks is friends. But in a lot of situations in the world, there can only be one frame that is true. So what do I mean? If now what we are doing is we are not talking about yo mama jokes, and we are trying to fight each other, we are trying to intimidate each other, right? So now what we are doing is that we have now gone beyond the joking point, right? Someone have taken the joke too far, and then now we are in the situation of like, okay, now I'm unhappy, and now you're unhappy. And you can say that in that situation, hey, our frame actually ends up coming together, right? Because now we are in the same frame, which is I'm unhappy, I'm angry at you, and you're angry at me. But in this situation, then the frame translate towards maybe what I think is that I'm stronger than you. I read you and I size you up, and human beings by nature, not human beings, right? Animal by nature have the ability to size each other up. And sizing each other up is also one of the very key principles when it comes down to power, because again, power works so inherently on the animal mind that a lot of this tends to be intuitive. We look at somebody, they're like, oh no, they're bigger than me, I don't want to fight the person, right? But assuming that I size the person up and I see it as I am physically stronger than you, and this person is sizing me up and he thinks that I am physically stronger than you. Both of our frames have now it become in direct conflict with each other. In the sense of both of these frames cannot be true at the same time. And the only way for us to reconcile the differences, you can say that, is to thrash it out, right? Is to actually get into a physical confrontation where one beats the other person to a pulp, and then it has objectively shown that, okay, what tends to happen is that maybe, for example, like we fight, right, and I win, then what tends to happen is that, well, I am seen to be more powerful than this person, and then this person will now take the frame of like, okay, I'm weaker than this person. And again, this translates towards how animals are in the wild, right? When two animals try to fight for dominance of each other, they size each other up, and then if they are unable to intimidate the other person, then what tends to happen is that they trash it out, and then a victor is obviously shown. So again, when it comes down to framing, when it comes down to power, understanding frames is very, very important. And in the example that I give you, it's about dominance, right? It's about dominance, it's about asserting my frame to the world. And you can say that if, let's say, we were to assume, if I were to give you this analogy, right? If everybody is traveling in the world in a bubble, so to speak, and this bubble will go up, down, left, right, etc., right? Omnidirectional. But not only are you traveling through the world, people are also traveling through the world. So inevitably, two might crash. Just like if, let's say, now what I'm saying is that we are not traveling in a bubble, what we are traveling is in a car in general, right? If I travel in a way that, let's say I want to go straight, and what you want to do is that you want to go straight, but what we are going to do is that we are going to crash into each other if both of us were to continue on our path, then you can say that the person who is able to exert their desires upon the world is the one to be seen to be more powerful. So if I were to go forward and I don't avoid you, and I cause you to have to eventually change course to avoid me, I have been seen to be more powerful. And if I were to use a road example, right, like cars in general, you see from a perspective of a Mercedes and a Toyota. If both of them are going from the same direction, assuming there's no objectively right, objectively wrong, and who broke traffic rules, right? If both of them are going to collide with each other, you can say that, yeah, in that situation, if you are in a Mercedes, you can double down and say that, like, you know, well, I'm going to collide with you anyway. I'm going to collide with you anyway, because when it comes down to repercussion, the punishment of crashing, probably, if it comes down to a situation of we're claiming on each other's insurance, then probably if you are liable, you're going to have to pay a bigger price. So if you are a Toyota, then probably what you tend to want to do is that you tend to want to avoid that crash, right? Because the punishment is going to be worse for you. And that is one example. Then you can say that another perspective also exists. If I'm the Toyota and I see it from the perspective of I don't care. I don't care that I'm going to pay more. I will crash the car. I will risk my life. I will risk your life. And you can say that, well, because I'm driving a Toyota, maybe, well, not to say that people who drive a Toyota is going to be less well off than people who drive a Merc, because I know that there are people who are going to go out of their way to make bad financial decisions just to own a Mercedes, and then there are going to be people who are actually managing money a lot better who buys a Toyota. So it's not objective to say that if you're in a Mercedes, you're a better person. If you're in a Toyota, you're a worse person. But if we take the example of your worth is equivalent to the car that you drive, you can say that, well, the person if I'm a Toyota and I crash and both of us die, you stand to lose more than me. So therefore, I don't care, I'm going to continue my path. If we crash, we crash. in this situation, you can say that, well, if the person who drives the Merc value his life, then what he tend to do is that he tend to want to swerve and avoid that collision. Right? What does this whole example, what is the moral of this example that I'm trying to share? I'm trying to share these two principles. Principle number one is that whoever is able to exert their initial desire is the one to be seen to be stronger. And you can see this from your own personal life, right? If your boss says do this, but if your boss says do A and you want to do B and you want to keep your job, you are going to do what your boss wants. Basically doing, right? Because your boss have the power over reward and punishment over you. Therefore, you back down. But again, not only, although you can say that whoever who backs down tends to be seen as weaker, it is not always the weaker person that backs down. And you can say that in the example of the Toyota, right? He could be in a objectively weaker position than the person in the Mercedes, but the fact that he exerted his desire on the world and caused people to have to adapt around that makes him more powerful in this particular example. Right? So again, number two is that power is not logical. Right? One is that the exerting desires. Right? Number two is that power is not logical. Power exists so long as somebody believes power exists. And you can say that one of the examples that I can give you, right? And if you want to exert power, you have to understand to a certain extent how emotion works and how people size each other up. One of the way that if you want to screw with somebody when it comes down to confrontation, and in your life, I'm pretty sure that if maybe you have experienced this already, if you haven't experienced this, you probably will experience this some point in your life. You are going to meet people who inherently are going to try to exert power over you. And usually these people who exert power over you, they themselves are not in actual fact powerful. You can say that the reason why they want to exert power and they want to make other people feel like shit is because at some point in the past someone have exerted power over them and they made them feel like shit, basically. And what they want to do is that they want to pass on the hurt. So generally, these type of people are going to be people who exert power on people who are weaker than them, so to speak. People who will not retaliate. So the whole idea is that in the animal kingdom, right? If let's say I'm a wolf, well, this is a shitty wolf, right? And I see another wolf. And what we're trying to do is that we're trying to intimidate each other. We're trying to sense who is more dominant. Yes, what we can do is that we can get into a physical fight. But if we get into a physical fight, you can say that even if I were to win, I might get injured along the way. And I might get so injured to a point that I might not be able to hunt. And yes, I managed to successfully kill you, but I also end up dying in the long run because I'm too injured to hunt, right? So most of the time you can say that people are not quick to jump into confrontation. And yes, people are not quick to jump into confrontation. Number one is because, well, we don't know whether we'll win, right? You can say that people who have extensive training in hand-to-hand combat are much more likely to be physically confrontational, right? If you're a hammer, if what you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. The principle is basically that, right? Again, when it comes down to power, power works on the idea of I don't care whether you're happy or not. If anything, the more unhappy I can make you and you'll still put up with it, I have more power over you. Because the fact that you have to tolerate my misbehavior meant that I have power. So if you want to understand power, you can think of power in that way, right? So going back to the example, you're going to meet people who in general are going to want to intimidate you, but they are not going to be able to back up their threats. And you can say that the day and the moment that you stand up to them, bullies in general, what tends to happen is that well, they are going to basically leave you alone. Because the whole idea of the two wolves again, I don't want to fight somebody who potentially, even if the person is weaker than me or the wolf is weaker than me, I don't want to fight somebody who could potentially injure me. And predators in the wild works like this, right? A predator do not want to go after a prey that have the chance of fighting back, right? The lion is going to look for the weakest cattle in the herd. The one that probably is the small one, the young one, the one that's not that fast, the one that's a little bit old, compared to the buffalo or ox or wildebeest that is in their prime. Because, well, if it's in their prime, a prey fights back because the prey is not going to lie down and die. Then you can say that the predator potentially have a chance that they're going to get injured. So the whole idea is that when it comes down to meeting this type of people, what tends to happen is that they are afraid of confrontation. If you confront them, then they're going to back off, right? But the whole idea is that if they were to successfully intimidate you and, well, they cause you to take certain action, they belittle you. So for example, they insult you and they are able to get away with it, they're able to make you feel shitty inside, then you can say that in this situation, yes, what they feel is power. And power, by the way, is always a feeling. It's always a feeling, right? It's always a feeling, which is why I said that power is so fundamentally linked with feeling. It's because you get, when exerting power, what you get is satisfaction. To a certain extent, most of the time when people exert power, no, that's actually a stretch. That's actually a stretch. What I wanted to say is that most of the time when people exert power, what they are looking for is emotional satisfaction. I don't consciously think that is the case, or at least I haven't thought enough of that to actually conclude that that's to be the case. But definitely what I can say is that exerting power gives certain emotional satisfaction. To a certain extent, I can say that the reason why people are sadistic and why sadism is not a trait that is only felt by particular subset of people. You can say that for people who we deem to be sadists, they tend to have sadistic traits to be greater than what is normal. But you can say that based on that, sadism, a small amount of sadism, is inherent in the human animal. So power will basically fit that sadism, right? And you can say that, well, why is the person being mean to me? Why is the person bullying me? Is that, well, because bullying you felt good. Being in power felt good. And if you are learning power to a certain extent, you can say that there's going to be a subset of people whose motivation to learn power is because at some point power have been utilized against them. Which, by the way, if that's the case, this is who you are, right? And if that's who you are, I would highly suggest that you probably want to rethink your path. That probably is not a path that is fundamentally desirable. Again, you are your own human being. You can do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, from my personal experience, people who are truly powerful, most of the time, do not wield power. Because people who are powerful understands that the best way to get people to do whatever they want is through influence. But the difference between somebody who utilizes influence and somebody who utilizes influence because that's the only thing that they can use because they can't use power, versus somebody who is powerful but still choose to use influence, the difference between both of them is that if shit hits the fan, what happens? So when it comes down to explaining power, right, I like to draw a lot of similarities with animals. And you can say that to a certain extent, there's going to be rabbits. There's going to be rabbits. And rabbits in general are not threatening to anything. Because a rabbit cannot kill anything. A rabbit is small and fluffy. A rabbit will never be able to kill a tiger. And you can say that, while some people are rabbits, there are some people who are going to be lions. And then there are going to be any middle predator. I can't think of any middle predators. Maybe foxes. I can't draw animals in general, right? But you get the whole idea, right? There's gonna be people who are rabbits, there are gonna be people who are lion, and there are gonna be people who are foxes. A rabbit is going to use influence because a rabbit understands that he cannot threaten anybody. Because a rabbit is small, a rabbit is timid, a rabbit is not willing to fight a lion. And a lion knows this, a fox knows this, and when it comes down to power, the counterparty human being is able to smell that very quickly, whether or not you are willing to fight me. And again, how do I know? It's because I smell your fear. I smell your fear, I smell your desires. And because I'm utilizing power. But again, the lion will understand inherently that if I were to utilize power all the time, people are going to shun me. And when people shun me, I have nothing to eat. And in order for me to eat, I need to ensure people are close to me. And maybe eat in this term is interchangeable with exerting influence over somebody. Right? Changing somebody's mind, getting the results that I want. And it's so much easier to fill my belly by using influence. But at any point of time, somebody tries to exert power over me when I'm trying to use influence, then what I'll do is that I'll exert power back. Right? If what you're going to do is that you're going to physically threaten me, you are going to try to exert power over me, what I'm going to do is that, okay, well, then let's fight, right? If what you want to do is that you want to tear each other to pieces, then we're going to tear each other to pieces, right? And this goes down to my last point when it comes down to this video, which, by the way, I can already understand that this video is going to be very confusing, right? But this is going to be my last point. And I promise you I will come back to this video to actually touch up on this topic in the future and put them down to actual points, right? So you can say that this video is probably going to be me just brainstorming off the top of my head what I think power is. One last principle that you need to understand is that when two human beings interact with each other using power. So for example, now I'm threatening you. You better do this or else. Right? You better do this or else. You can say that while human beings were able to measure each other up to a certain extent, maybe based on your physical build, based on the things that I can see about you, physically, by just taking into consideration physical, you are maybe a threat level of, in terms of strength, right? In terms of strength, if I'm a 10, I see that you're an 8. You probably is an 8 based on your physical. And because of that, if my judgment is correct, when I threaten you with, you better do this or else, then what you tend to do is that, oh, okay, I'm going to do it. Or like, you're going to be like, hey, why are you being so mean to me? And then like end up you're still going to do the thing. But the whole idea is that I'm mean to you and you end up doing the things that I want you to do. Right? But the whole idea is that when two human beings try to size each other up, I have no idea if this person is a rabbit, or this person is a lion. I have no idea. Right? And in order for me to actually size this person up, I'm using the duck principle. If it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it probably is a duck. But in the event that this is a platypus, the way that clues me in that this person is probably a platypus and not a duck is how they react to my threat. You can say that in this frame that I'm trying to lay out is that I am stronger than you, which is why I'm telling you what to do. When the other person's reaction to that threat is that, what if I don't? What if I don't? Right? What they're basically doing is that they're saying, what they're explaining in animal term is that, well, let's fight then. Right? Because you can say that what I'm explaining in animal term is that do this or I'm going to fight, or I'm going to fight you. Right? We are going to fight. In animal terms. In human language, I'm saying that do this or else. Right? But then in animal terms, what the person have just replied me is that, well, let's fight. And this goes in terms of, this also works in animals, by the way, just like it works in human being. For two animals that is trying to size each other up, they are unable to determine whether or not one is the prey or one is the predator in the relationship. And you can say that the first person that acts like a prey is going to be affirmed to be the prey. Right? If I treat you like a prey and you act and reacted like a prey, guess what? You're a prey. In this situation, you'll be the rabbit. Right? If I think that you're a rabbit, you have a physical strength of 8, and I intimidate you and I tell you that, like, do this or else, what I'm basically doing is that I'm treating you like a prey. But if you are saying that, okay, well, if let's say you're not happy, let's fight, in animal terms, what you basically told me is that, like, what if I don't? What if I don't want to do it? Then what are you going to do about it? What this person have just said is that I am not the prey in this situation. Right? And in this situation, you can say that, well, it will cause this other person to actually ponder, am I the predator in this case? Because this other person is not acting like a predator. Maybe what I am is the prey. Maybe I think that this person is a rabbit, but in actual fact, this is a lion. So in the animal kingdom, there's the idea of there is the false charge, right? Or the charge to intimidate. So for example, if let's say there's two animals, and what I tend to do, and one cannot determine what the other one is, whether or not they're prey or predator, then one will try to charge intimidate. Is that even a word? Right? The whole idea is that I'm trying to intimidate you by charging towards you, right? To see is that whether or not you reacted, whether or not you run away. If you run away, then I know that, okay, haha, I'm the predator, you are the prey. Which is why if you have pets in general, you start running in one direction, the instinctive behavior of animals is to chase. And this works so intuitively to animals that to a certain extent is that if you expose the back of your neck to a large cat like a lion or tiger, and you can see videos on this of those in the zoo, the instincts of those lion and tiger is to pounce, because again you have been seen as a prey because you don't pay attention, right? They see it as a hunting type of scenario. That's the frame that they have. But going back to this example, it's the idea of, well, if I have just made a false charge towards you and you don't flinch, if you turn out to be a lion, I have now created distance. I have now shortened the distance from you, and if you truly is a lion and I'm the prey in this situation, I am in more danger than what I initially is in. So basically in human speech is that before I told you to do these things, now that I told you and opened myself up into interaction, and you can say that a confrontation with you, the fact that you are not scared and the fact that you potentially could have more power over you will inherently instill the emotion of fear. Which is why it goes back to the idea of fear and desire is so inherent when it comes down to power. And if now you are this person and you know how to read emotion and you see this fear, guess what? This person have now acted just like a prey. And you know for sure that the objective frame of this interaction is that you are the predator and this person is the prey. And guess what, right? This person now does the threat of do this or else. Well, in this situation, guess what? Whatever this person wants you to do and the person threatens you to do, you are not going to do it. And you can say that this person probably is not going to have the guts to retaliate against you. Mainly because this person saw you as a lion. And again, I understand that probably this video is going to be all over the place. This video is going to be insanely confusing. Hopefully not as confusing as I think it is in my mind. But the only takeaway that you need to have in this conversation and in this topic, right, is the idea of framing. The idea of framing, which is animals in general is trying to create a certain frame and trying to make sense of what that frame actually is, right? So, in any case, I know this video is insanely confusing. If you have any questions about this, then feel free to let me know. And if you have and perhaps if you have a way that you think that this can be explained in a better way, such as like, maybe you want to like, touch on this, touch on framing first, framing and before this and another thing, then potentially let me know as well, because again, clearly I'm still figuring this out. But in any case, this is where I'm going to end off today's video. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on this, and I'll see you in the next one.